Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Possibilities with Monique DeMeo. I have a super special guest today, Carajane Moore, in the house. Oh man, if she was in person, I would be squeezing the pulp out of her, or she might be squeezing the pulp out of me. It depends on how you look at it. But Cara Jane is an awesome human, an awesome woman, and has a successful sales consulting firm and is lead off on our external narrative chapter in the book. As you may or may not remember, The 7 Secrets to Designing a Life You Love, a practical guide for women in leadership. So, Cara Jane, welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's good to see you.
You too, you too. So, we're going to talk. So, being peers, the idea of external narrative, which is intertwined with internal narratives, as we all know, is a term I don't think we heard in our youth.
No, I don't think we heard it at all. And in fact, I think it was so commonplace, most people didn't really understand that they were projecting an external narrative.
Tell me more about what you mean there.
Well, eh, in my world, I think in your world too, based on some of our conversations, we were told how you're supposed to look and how you're supposed to be and how are the picture for the family. And so there's this set of expectations of how you're supposed to be that were never questioned, and it was never really thought of as an external narrative. This is just who you are from a very small child, and what you're supposed to look like, and what you're supposed to say and what you're not supposed to say, and what's appropriate. And in today's world, it wouldn't be appropriate, but this is what girls do and this is what boys do when we were little, right? And I of course had two older brothers, and so I was, playing football with the boys, and that's not what girls are supposed to do.
So, for those of you who haven't read the book, and I hope you do, Cara Jane is an ultimate athlete. And it's kind of ironic that she should be a better, ooh, did I say that out loud, athlete than her brothers. I know one of her brothers. Don't tell anybody. So, and I think there's a story that I'd like Cara Jane to share that she tells in the book, which really personifies what we're talking about here, which is like, how do you show up as a girl back in this day? Tell us the story about what was expected of you when your aunt died.
Yeah. So I was an athlete, as Monique said. And so I was on the diving team and I was at a diving tournament. And this is back in the day where I guess we didn't have regulations because the pool was more shallow than what was considered a standard pool. But we were still diving in a shallower pool. And so in my first jump into the pool that day, I came down hard, feet first, and broke 2 to 3 toes and it was not good. But I, of course, being the athlete, was like, we play injured. And so I thought I'd go ahead and dive. I got disqualified as I was one of the top 3 in the final of the tournament, which was unfortunate. But so I got sent off to the hospital. Long story short is I broke these toes. And my mom and dad were out of town on vacation. And so when they got back from vacation, I'm in a wooden foot cast thing and crutches. And they came back because my aunt had died. And so we were going to have a funeral. And my mom looked at me and she's like, "What happened to you?" And I'm like, "Well, broke a few toes. Look at that purple foot. It's not really comfy." And mom's like, "Well, yeah, that's not going to work. You're going to have to you're going to have to be dressed for the funeral." And I'm thinking pantsuit, maybe I could figure out how to do that. And no, it was full skirt, heels, the whole bit for the funeral. And I had to learn how to walk down the aisle without wincing in the heels to make it go, because that's what we had to look like. We had to look polished and professional and appropriate. I guess the word that came to my mind is appropriate, but I never really had a definition of appropriate. It was whatever I think other people thought we were supposed to look like. It's the best way I would describe it.
It just occurred to me that I have such a parallel story that literally I broke my toe the week before my dad passed, and I had to show up to his, memorial service with my husband's shoe and pants because it was a snowstorm and I couldn't fit anything over my foot.
Right.
At least nobody made me wear heels and a skirt. Okay, so you had to look a certain way. And by the way, for those of you who are not watching, Cara Jane is beautiful, like physically beautiful. So you have, the blonde bombshell kind of with brains combination, and you're, like you show up and you're like, oh shit, the whole package, here she is. And so she's got to look a certain way. She's got to act a certain way. And, the funny thing is, Cara Jane's talking about appropriate, but today appropriate is different because, like, we both have daughters in their 20s who have their own view of, like, how they want to show up. They have choice in the matter. We didn't have choice. So, how does that sort of inform how you're parenting your own, or you parented your own daughter? Because now she's in her 20s and she's launched. But tell me a little bit about like what she's perceiving to be the things that she's dealing with.
Yeah, it's so interesting because my daughter, I always joke that my daughter defined who she wanted to be by trying to be to somewhat the opposite of what everybody's expectations were of her. So she's one of those that wants to push and break all boxes. Don't put me in a box because then I'm going to fight the box. And I wanted her to be strong and independent. I didn't want her to feel like she had to be submissive to somebody else's definition of who she was, that she had the right to have her own agency and her authority to be who she wanted to be. And so from a very young age, I definitely supported her. We switched schools. We did all sorts of things to ensure that she felt like she had a voice and she was who she wanted to be. But at the same time, to your point, there's that friction, right? Even in their 20s and they're becoming professional. And she's in a PhD program in chemical engineering. And so she's working in a lab right now. And, and there's that part of me as a mom that goes, is that appropriate? And I'm back to my mom's term, appropriate. What's appropriate? Honestly, I don't know why that's stuck in my head. And it works. And it works for her. And so she's become very comfortable being who she is, whether you and I would identify with business dress. Today's world is entirely different. And it's working and she's doing great in what she's doing. I would never show up dressed the way she does, but she always looks good for her.
Her context is different.
Absolutely. And so letting go of my own boxes of what is appropriate and learning to do that, right? The idea that I actually use the word appropriate scares me now.
Yeah, I know, right? The word, yeah, because the word appropriate is it's so variable depending on what your lens is. Because appropriate if you were in Saudi Arabia, no matter who you were, would be different than the appropriate in maybe Indianapolis versus, let's say, New York City. That could be a different kind of appropriate based on the work situation. She's a chemical engineer, probably surrounded by men. So in this context, she's got the same thing that you and I had coming up through sales and marketing. We were surrounded by men in a man's world. She's in a different man's world, but yet the same man's world.
Yes. Well, and that, I think you and I have talked about that too. That is, I think, also a challenge because you and I fought, and that's in the book, and many of the women in the book talk about fighting to be accepted as a woman in a man's world and the things that we did to do that. And I talk about that with my daughter about how I woke up every day fighting, and I woke up every day fighting with the hopes that she didn't have to wake up every day fighting.
That's a masterclass, people. That is a masterclass. What Cara Jane just said is the purpose of why I'm sitting here interviewing her. I don't want to have other women fight as hard as we had to.
Right, exactly. But unfortunately, you and I would agree in certain places, in certain circumstances, they still are fighting. And in the world where it's still a man's world, there's still a fight. However, as I talk to you, I think in some ways it's a little harder. I think it's harder because when we were back then, we knew we were fighting. There was no light at the end of the tunnel. We didn't know what it looked like. to not have to fight. We didn't know what it looked like to run our own businesses. You didn't see many women running their own businesses at that time, right? You didn't see, Fortune 500 companies with women as CEOs. They just weren't there. And so our fight did matter. But when you sit back and you hear the conversations my daughter is having and the challenges that she's got where she's at, it's hard because we fought for that. But then she sees me running a business and she sees other strong, successful women out there who don't have to put up with some of the stuff she still has to put up with. And it's hard because you can see what it should look like, but she's in a position in a PhD program that she has to finish where she's at first. And so you see that light and then you're stuck. And I think sometimes that makes the oppression stronger.
Hmm. That is a good point. A very, very good point. I think what I'm getting is we didn't have the role models that they had with us. We didn't have the possibilities, pardon the pun here, but it's true. The possibility. So I didn't have in my circle of influence, certainly in my family, I didn't have anybody. Well, my aunt was pretty strong, but she was totally career focused. But there wasn't necessarily somebody I wanted to emulate because I felt like there wasn't a lot of balance in her world that I wanted for myself. Having said that, my mom wasn't a career person. My parents were blue collar. So for me, the circle that I could emulate wasn't there. So I saw that in possibilities with other people, but it was a consistent fight. Our daughters are seeing that we sort of mastered part of the fight, but the idea of paying your dues is a big thing for me. I believe that today's generation doesn't necessarily appreciate the battle and the journey that we went through to get to where we are on the other side, where the light is at the end of the tunnel. Because our tunnel was very black, very dark, very non lit up.
There was no light there.
There was no light there, and the light that was there was an oncoming train. Don't go there, Monique. Okay, fine. Sorry, I'll stay out of that tunnel. So I think I appreciate what you're saying about the young women. Do you think that they appreciate that there's a journey that needs to be had in order to get to that?
I'm not sure. I also don't know if that's necessarily their fault because they see the world, which I love because that's part of what we fought for. They see the world as they shouldn't have to make that fight. And so they are resentful that they do have to fight. Now, I will talk about paying your dues in a different area, but in this particular area, they see where you don't have to fight, so they resent having to fight. And so I understand why that's hard for them. It's really hard for them because, you know, they weren't there. Of course, my daughter wasn't there when I was fighting. Your daughter wasn't there when you were fighting. So they didn't see the fight, and so that's why I think the paying the dues, they can't appreciate it because they already feel like they're entitled to be where they are. And you and I, one, modeled it, two, demonstrated they should expect it. And so three, it's unfair for us to not understand that they feel like they deserve it because that's what we told them to feel like.
Yeah. So the stories, so the external narrative, the story that we tell other people, your story was for a long time was this, I'm the strong family, I'm the jock of the family.
I'm the jock of the family.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden it didn't serve you, did it? And then one day you decided like,
Yeah, I was the jock of the family, but at the same time, I always had an external narrative of a manufactured life.
do tell us about that. Because I think the listeners to this can totally appreciate what a manufactured life looks like. Or maybe they don't, but they have their own.
Well, I think that that's the whole case. I think that everybody has a manufactured life and of what they want the world to see. And I think today's world is worse because of social media, and all the manufactured, it has to look perfect all the time. I will tell you how grateful I am we did not have cell phones when I was growing up, middle school, high school, college. The time that I fell flat on my face in a great big huge hotel auditorium area when I'm supposed to be the speaker, okay, sure, that's not embarrassing. And I hope there aren't any cameras around. So I'm thrilled we don't have that everything has to look perfect thing. Absolutely thrilled about that. But the idea that we have to look perfect is that manufactured life. And my manufactured life was I had to look perfect. And that was everywhere. The perfect mom, the perfect working woman, the perfect wife, the perfect daughter. And that manufactured life becomes exhausting when you look a certain way at work and into the world, and then you come home and you're a different way. That's a different manufactured life. This is what I'm supposed to look like for the wife, right? And so that becomes very exhausting. And I stood behind the scenes because our business, as my brothers were the face of the business for the longest time. And so I was behind the scenes running the business in this view of what does a perfect executive look like? And all of my language is formal and specific. Well, thank you, Monique. We appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today. And and when you get to know me, people are like, okay, that's a different Cara Jane, right? But in business, I was all formal, and I fall into that sometimes because that was the way for so many years. I don't want to tell how old I am. For so many years, I had to.
Please, I'm older than you. Stop.
So for years, that was how I was. So when I was forced to not be that person, that was a wake up call.
Yeah, and it's funny. I don't, that was a default though. If you didn't act that way, like that whole buttoned up professional, don't mess with me, collared bow ties and all that crap that we wore. Oh my God. So the difference I want to get for the younger listeners here, and obviously some the older the listeners that are our peers understand the context. For the younger listeners, you want to remember that you were fighting to be seen as an equal to men. Therefore, you had to kind of show up as manly as you could. And that's why that we were not really encouraged to be feminine or in any way flowery. Like when I worked at IBM, I was given I was written up and spoken to, addressed seriously on what my choices of apparel were.
We had the same thing. The company that I worked for, First Data Resources, now this is years ago, but, I was to be in a dark suit. Skirt has to be at the knee length, like just past the knee, straight skirt, jacket, blouse, the beautiful fluffy bow tie that was horrifying. Um, and then nylons. I don't think you see a woman wearing nylons these days for the most part. And the awful nylons too, the horrible nylons.
The ones that made you look like a nurse somewhere in the 1940s. Yeah, like that.
I grew up in Catholic schools where you looked like the nuns. Except it wasn't a habit. I had those old woman long, nylons, and then appropriate
Appropriate.
shoes.
All right. So now fast forward today, we literally have Lululemon, leisure pants floating around the place where if we had worn that, somebody would have said, "When's your yoga class?" And that wasn't acceptable. But the mentality of how you showed up, your external narrative, you're okay. Now you're the smart one. Now you have to create your own voice and your own authentic self, and still be professional and well thought of, and paid a lot of money to be a consultant. So I mean, not to embarrass Cara Jane, but she makes a lot of money. People pay her for her advice, like big money. So, here comes again the blonde bombshell through the door. Who is the Cara Jane that walks through the door today? Like, you're unapologetic today. How did you get there?
Yeah. So first and foremost, I wear cabbie clothes, and I wear cabbie clothes honestly just because I know what size I am, and it's easy, and they all match, and it's like granables for adults. Okay. But my stylist is a good friend of mine, and she taught me how to dress in a way that I was confident and comfortable. And that's how I established how do I show up. I had somebody help me, to be honest. I'm all about having, advisors. So I outsource everything. But she helped me become confident in my clothes. And so I feel most confident. I can show up any way I want. I mean, I could probably show up with jeans and a t-shirt, honestly, but I feel most confident in a jacket. And that's just probably because of the years of wearing a jacket and a tailored look. I also, because of the years of doing a tailored look, I don't do super feminine. I am not, femme fatale really. So I'll wear jeans, more of a dress jean, and a jacket. I'll wear nice pants and a jacket. I don't wear heels anymore though, because I want to be able to walk and have a back and all the rest of that for the rest of my life. So I wear my new thing is I have a pair of loafers in almost every single color. So I wear, and a chunky heel loafer. Or right now, I'll be honest, I went to a couple of meetings recently and I had my Birkenstocks on.
Oh no, God forbid. Okay.
Can you believe that?
No.
Yeah, but it's taken, I will be honest, for people who are young and still trying to figure out where you fit and all the rest of that stuff. The unfortunate part of the reality is I'm at the top of the food chain in my business and in my world, so I can do that and it's accepted. If you're not at the top of the food chain, people will be judging you, and that's also unfortunate, but that is the reality of our life. And so what choices you make will impact what opportunities are provided you. I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm saying it is far less today than it was when you and I, Monique, were around, but that is still there. And that will impact your growth opportunities in your career.
Okay. I want to put a pin in that because I think there's so much to unpack there. Yes, ladies, you do have more choices. Yes, there is a leveler playing field. Yes, opportunities will be more available to you, but do not make a mistake in not paying attention to what Carajane just said. It is absolutely going to happen that you will be judged on your choices of dress and how you show up. Because if you're wearing a low cut, all out cleavage, bodycon dress up to your ass at work with high heels, it's going to be really, really hard for people to not jump to the obvious conclusion.
As a sales leader, my answer is, are you confusing people on what you're selling?
Ooh, baby. Say it again.
Are you confusing people on what you're selling? And I know that that comes harsh, and it's harsh as a woman to a woman. And I am unapologetically at being harsh. I absolutely want to applaud anybody to wear whatever they want to wear. Okay. I am not saying you shouldn't wear it, but understand that there are trades. There are trades. And so if you are dressed that way to go to work, you are confusing the male population and sometimes the female population and other people around you what it is that is your priorities. And so that's a trade. And by trading that, you are trading potentially other opportunities and you're trading respect. And once again, respect for who you are in some ways. And that's not saying you're wrong. I'm not saying that is the wrong attire for you because you like it. I'm saying understand what you trade in the marketplace for the decisions you're making.
That is the harsh reality. Because it is not just men, it is other women saying, like, what are you doing to our narrative? If there's 10 women in your department and one decides to go all out in that manner, what is she creating for the other 9?
True. Now I'm going to push back a little bit. I love where you're going because I think you're 100% right. But I want to make sure that you and I are both aligned on the fact that we are not saying you have to stand up and be dressed like everybody else in the room. So I just want to add some clarity that we're not saying that. What we are, and we are also not saying that it's okay that people judge you. I shouldn't have to be, the phrase of this generation, I shouldn't have to be responsible for what other people think. Fair enough. You shouldn't. You shouldn't be responsible for whatever somebody else thinks, but recognize they're still going to think it. So if you don't like the way they're responding from the thoughts that they have to what you are wearing, understand you aren't responsible for it, but you are receiving the actions or the consequences of it.
That's right. That's right. So so we talk in the book about choice, agency, and the idea that external narratives in and of themselves, as well as internal narratives, which I think we want to connect the dots on those two. How you talk to yourself and the story that you have for yourself about yourself. And I think that you and I have had a journey on that, because while your, external, beautiful, perfect, appropriate self shows up, there was an internal something or other story going on there that sounded like,
I'm not good enough. That's what this story sounded like for a long time. And I think that that's important to understand because I might sound like I'm all that and I've got it all put together, which is of course for me I just think it's hilarious because I'm still in the journey. I think we are all still in the journey, right? But for the longest time I had in my head I wasn't good enough. I wasn't good enough for the position I had. I didn't look the part. I didn't know enough. I wasn't good enough. And as I have changed the internal narrative and have learned to change the internal narrative, and I'll be honest, my internal narrative got shifted through a consultant, an advisor, because I told you I outsourced all things, including my thinking. No, I did outsource some of that to learn, and the program was called The Necessity of You, and it was really to help me sort out why I'm here and the fact that I'm here and there's a necessity for me, Carajane, not just anybody, not anybody in this body, but for Carajane to be here today in this world to accomplish things. And going through that process and shifting that narrative, I'm like, oh, I can be here. I should be here. I am good enough. Oh, look around. I am getting paid as a professional speaker. I do have, top selling books, bestseller books. I am, a consultant and I am running a successful business. And I do coach executives of Fortune 100 companies. Oh, oh, that means maybe I am good enough, right? And all those things were not enough. It was what was in here that had to shift for me to understand that I was good enough. And that's a journey, and it's a painful journey, but it's a journey.
isn't every internal narrative that is not aligned with where it should be some form of it's not enough? I'm not pretty enough. I'm not tall enough. I'm not thin enough. I'm not rich enough. I'm not any, fill in the blanks. All of us are walking around with a not enough story of some sort, a lack of scarcity, a story of scarcity. I think it's the idea that you have value. I think what you were pointing to is this, you have all of these things that are positives. You're contributing to the greater world. It's beyond, and I think that's choice too. Now that you're solid, or you're in on the journey, but you're solid in that you're adding value, what does that feel like?
It's very empowering. It's very freeing, it's very empowering. When I got to the point that I was good enough and my two different lives kind of ended up crashing together, it was amazing how many shifts I made pretty quickly, and how I got my energy back. Because it's exhausting being two different people. You got a person in your head, you got a person outside. You're trying to figure out who those two people are and how are they two people and not one person, right? Um, and so it's exhausting. And so when you get that, you get your energy back, you're empowered, you are confident in the decisions you make, that you made decisions before, but maybe you weren't as confident. Now you're like, no, I'm good with that. That's the way it's supposed to go. And you now start taking agency of your life instead of just agency of some of your decisions.
If you were to talk to the Cara Jane, the 30-year-old Cara Jane, what would you tell her?
Well, there's so many things I've learned. I don't know if we can get that all done in this one conversation. But first of all, I think I would love to have known me back then, right? To have known what it was like to own who I am and that internal narrative and then that external narrative, that I was good enough, right? And that I was here for a reason. And so I would love to be able to say to her, hey, Carajane, look up. You are amazing and you are here for a reason. And be confident. Maybe you don't know the reason yet, but be confident that you're here for a reason. And you aren't an accident. You aren't an accident. You are here for a reason. And so I think I would start there, because if you get that in your head, that flips the script about how you look at your life. Maybe you don't know your purpose yet. I know some of us get to know their purpose young. Other people are striving throughout. I think I'm going to probably have 15 different purposes by the time I get done with my life.
Which is
But,
good.
which is fantastic, in different journeys. And I love that. But you don't have to know your purpose. All you have to know is you're necessary. You are necessary. That's what I think is important.
You don't have to know your purpose. You just have to know you're necessary. I think you might want to copyright that. So it's the you are necessary, and we talk a little bit, like Jen in the book, who I'm interviewing later, she talks about pivots, and I think this whole idea of having to figure it all out, or know, so you get out of college and that's it, like, oh my God, I got to choose my path and I'm stuck with it. What do you have to say about that?
No, I don't think, no, you're never stuck with it. Absolutely. Here's the thing. When you understand that you are necessary, whatever you choose to go do is what you should go do. So if, I originally went to school to be a doctor, that didn't work out. Funny we should say that. So that didn't work out. So, I pivoted and I ended up with a business degree. Okay, great. So then, I did business and I'm still in business. But I guess my point being is I've done business working for big companies. I've done business working for small companies. I've done business running my own businesses. I have sold 14 different things. I didn't stay in any one vertical. I did healthcare. I did pharmaceutical. I did technology. I mean, I didn't stay in any one thing. I did a lot of things. Then I stopped all that. I went and built beach houses, designed, built beach houses,
You did? I didn't know that about you.
lived on the beach, designed and built beach houses. I managed them, sold them, got my broker's license, did all of that. What took my daughter and my husband and I, and we traveled around the country in an RV, and I learned how to be a teacher, and I homeschooled my child. So you can take any path you want to take. There is no, you're going to do this for the rest of your life. That is not this world. You're going to change, and change is fantastic because you get to learn so much more about yourself.
So what you're saying is, when you get to a fork in the road, you should take it?
Yeah. Are you feeding me? Are you feeding me?
I am. I am. No, it's the idea that, you're not, I love this. You're not stuck with anything and you have agency. And then if it doesn't work out, you pivot. And what's the worst that can happen? It's not for you. So you don't like being a doctor. Okay. You don't like renovating beach houses. So by the way, I would. Anyway,
No, I loved it. I loved it. It was back right before the 2008, 2007, 2008 crash.
so again, we all think, because we're women and we want to have everything perfect, back to the conditioning, we should choose the perfect career and go down the perfect path and have a perfect life and blah, 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 blah. And it gets bumpy and the road is a little winding. And you're saying, don't worry about it. Doesn't suit you. Pick something else.
One, don't worry about it. Two, expect it. I want to be very clear. Life is messy, and you got to get into. There's a book out there I've read recently called The Discipline of Disturbance. You have to get used to the idea that life is going to get hard. It's going to get dirty. It's going to get messy. It's going to be wonderful and fantastic. But it's wonderful and fantastic because you've gone through the dirty. So it's not that, it's going to get that way. So there isn't going to be a perfect. And so therefore, give yourself grace. Give yourself grace. It's not going to be perfect. And you could do everything right. I was talking recently to a friend woman that I mentor, and doing everything right, saving the money and working the job and raising the kids and the family and the whole thing. And life happened. Life happened. And they ended up having to spend a lot of money out of their savings, and they were going to have to move because they couldn't afford that house anymore, and all sorts of things. They did it all right, but life happened. So those savings are for life happening, right? So my point of that is give yourself grace and don't expect it to be perfect, because it won't. I mean, I want to talk about a time where my daughter, I'm trying to raise the perfect daughter, right? We're in these ages. I'm raising the perfect daughter. She's got to be maybe 3, and she's an adorable blue-eyed blonde. Adorable. I mean, big blue eyes, the cutest little thing you could possibly see. And we're in the grocery store, and it's a rough day for her. And we're up back at the way back glass, refrigerated cases. And she wanted something, and the answer was, of course, no. And she looks at me, screams at the top of her lungs, "You suck." All these people are around me, right? I am horrified. And she's 3. Like, first of all, where'd she get the word? 2, how does she know how to use it accurately at 3?
Because you raised her to be smart and she's got your effing GNA. That's why.
And they're like going, "Oh, sweetheart, you're so lucky. We are in the middle of a grocery store with cameras."
What did you do? I want to know what you did.
I grabbed her a little close and whispered in her ear, "Sweetheart, you are lucky you're in a grocery store and we're leaving. And mommy's going to talk to you a little harder later, but you don't ever speak to mommy that way, and you are in your room for the rest of the day." No, it wasn't that bad, but we did have a very, very specific conversation. She never did that again, but you're just absolutely going, "Are you kidding me? Really? Here in front of all these people?"
And again, back to the Carajane of today might have handled the conversation a little differently, right? Let's just say it was your granddaughter that pulled that little stunt. "Grandma, you suck." I think you might have had a different. You're like, "Oh yeah," because we don't care as much of what people think these days.
Well, that's the other thing. Don't care. Don't compare, and don't care. It doesn't matter. We're here on this journey on our own. No matter how many people come into our lives and go out of our lives, at the end of the day, my brother passed 5 years ago. And to be honest, it's still heart-wrenching to me. But what did we learn? We learned he came here, he was wonderful. There were lots of people in his life. And when he passed all by himself. We were all there, but it's just him. The journey is your own journey. People come and are part of your lives, share your lives, partner with your lives. Maybe they're there for a season, maybe they're for your whole life, but you're still here on your own. So you got to make your decisions for you.
Well, if that isn't a perfect soundbite, I don't even know how to top that. I'm totally serious. Okay, seriously, guys, that is it. It's you are here. Pick your journey, pick your narratives, and make the best of it. And understand that nothing is ever going to be perfect, but it'll be yours.
And that's the other thing that's so interesting. I don't know if you've seen any of the studies about, when they were trying to create those I'm going to say avatars, but when they beauty up the people on the movies and the commercials and all the rest of that stuff. And so then they started to create these created people that were not actual real people. Inconsistencies, the things that were not perfect on people, were part of what made people beautiful.
The flaws, the imperfections.
The imperfections, that's the word I was looking for. The imperfections that are on everybody, those imperfections are part of what make you beautiful.
Or unique anyway, which is beautiful.
But that's part of the beauty, right? So the it's not perfect, and you're not going to be perfect, and we're never going to look perfect, and that's part of our story, and that's part of what makes us and makes us beautiful.
Okay. Well, I think we should probably wrap that up, my friend. You've given us a masterclass in so many things, honestly. I mean, from manufactured life to confidence, outsourcing, your advisors in the areas that you need the help. God bless those stylists. We love them. What are you confusing people with what you're selling? Being on the journey, the conversational control, that you have if you choose the journey if you choose the narrative that you want. What you told that younger Cara Jane was amazing. So good. And I love that you are necessary. You might not know your purpose, but you should know that you are necessary. That's freaking awesome. So, my friends, Carajane Moore, you can reach her. I'll put the contact information in the show notes. The closest to a perfect beauty I've ever met. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to Possibilities with Monique DeMeo, where we unpack life as a female mover and shaker. If you like the show, please consider liking it, or better still, subscribing to it and leaving us a rating. It truly does help. Also, you can pick up my book, The 7 Secrets to Creating a Life You Love, a practical guide for women in leadership, which is coming out in September 2023. You can find the book, other episodes of this podcast, and how to stay in touch at moniquedemeo.com. DEMAIO. I look forward to seeing you again soon. With gratitude, Monique.